The night Gwen Stacy died. By the early 70s, Spider-Man was no longer just a teenager fighting colorful crooks. He was carrying real weight. Peter Parker was balancing his role as Spider-Man while trying to support his friend Harry Osborn, who had collapsed from a drug overdose. At Harry's bedside, Norman Osborn broke under the pressure. Memories came flooding back and he snapped back into his Green Goblin persona, remembering that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Norman went straight for Peter's heart. He kidnapped Gwen Stacy, Peter's girlfriend, and lured Spider-Man to a bridge for the showdown. The Goblin mocked him from the shadows, then hurled Gwen off the structure. Peter reacted in an instant, firing a web line at her legs. For a moment, he thought he'd saved her, but when he pulled Gwen up, she was gone. The sudden stop had snapped her neck. That panel shook comic books forever. Spider-Man stood there, devastated, while the Goblin slipped away, claiming she was dead before the webbing even touched her. When they clashed again in a warehouse, Peter came close to crossing a line. He beat Norman to the edge of death but stopped himself. In the chaos, the Goblin's own glider impaled him, ending the fight in brutal irony. Peter walked home broken. Gwen was gone. The Goblin was dead. And Mary Jane Watson, who had always been the life of the party, stayed behind to comfort him. That moment forged a bond that would reshape Peter's future. The story became a landmark in comics, proof that superheroes couldn't save everyone. A later editorial note confirmed the truth fans suspected. Gwen's neck had snapped from the whiplash of Peter's webbing. It made her death even heavier because in trying to save her, Spider-Man had accidentally sealed her fate. Spider-Verse. By 2014, Spider-Man's world was already massive, but Spider-Verse blew it wide open into the multiverse. It all started with Morlun, a predator who drained the life force of spider totems across dimensions. He slaughtered an alternate Peter Parker on Earth 311 and declared that the inheritors, his family, would keep hunting until every spider hero was gone. That threat pulled together the most unlikely team of wall crawlers ever assembled. Peter Parker was joined by Gwen Stacy from another world, newly introduced as Spider-Gwen. Cindy Moon, better known as Silk, entered the fight. Spider-Man 2099 traveled from the future. Noir brought his gritty 1930s detective edge. Spider UK, Spider-Punk, Scarlet Spiders, and even Spider-Ham showed up, each pulled from their own universe. Before the main event, Edge of Spider-Verse served as the introduction, laying the groundwork for all these heroes. When the Inheritors campaign began, it turned into a war across realities. Battles raged on city streets, cosmic landscapes, and the Inheritors' home dimension, Loomworld. Each spider hero had their own role. Some fought, others saved civilians, all carrying the weight of being hunted. The climax unfolded in a final stand on Loomworld. Through strategy and sheer numbers, the Spider Army overwhelmed Morlun and his family, forcing their retreat. It wasn't total victory, the Inheritors weren't destroyed, only pushed back. But it proved that spider heroes united across realities could withstand anything. The fallout was massive. Spider-Gwen became a breakout star with her own ongoing series. Other variants gained new prominence, from Noir to 2099. And for the first time, Spider-Man's mythology wasn't confined to Peter Parker alone. The death of Jean DeWolf. In the mid-80s, Spider-Man comics pushed into darker, street-level territory, and nothing captured that shift better than the death of Jean DeWolf. Jean wasn't a villain or a superhero. She was a police captain, a rare ally who respected Spider-Man when most of the force didn't. Her sudden murder shocked Peter Parker and set off one of his grittiest investigations. She was found dead in her apartment, gunned down in her sleep. The killer was the Sin Eater, a deranged vigilante armed with a shotgun who believed he was on a mission to punish sinners. His rampage didn't stop with Jean. He turned New York into a hunting ground, targeting judges, priests, and public figures. For Spider-Man, this was about justice for a friend. He pounded the streets looking for answers, and every time the Sin Eater struck, the city's fear grew. Even Daredevil joined the case, and the crossover between the two heroes created some of the most intense scenes of the era. The tension peaked when Spider-Man finally cornered the Sin Eater in a violent showdown. Fueled by anger, Peter nearly beat him to death in front of a mob of bystanders before Daredevil stopped him, reminding him of the line he couldn't cross. That moment showed just how close Peter came to letting grief consume him. When the mask came off, the Sin Eater was Stanley Carter, a disgraced ex-cop. That reveal made the story sting even harder, a reminder that evil didn't always wear a costume. Superior Spider-Man. Few arcs in Spider-Man history rattled fans like Superior Spider-Man. It started with Dr. Octopus on the brink of death. His body was failing, his time was running out, but he wasn't done fighting. Using a desperate mind swap experiment, Otto Octavius switched consciousness with Peter Parker, trapping Peter in his dying body and taking Spider-Man's life as his own. Moments later, Peter was gone, and Doc Ock was now behind the mask. At first, Otto relished the power. With Peter's memories, skills, and identity at his disposal, he claimed he could be a superior Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Smarter, tougher, more efficient. And in some ways, he was. He launched new tech, built spider-bots to patrol the city, and even established Parker Industries to give himself resources Peter never had. Criminals were dismantled with ruthless precision, and Otto's methods pushed New York into a new kind of order. But being Spider-Man wasn't just about winning fights. It was about responsibility, empathy, and restraint, things Otto never truly understood. His brutality crossed lines Peter never would have considered. Allies like Mary Jane, the Avengers, and even villains noticed that Spider-Man was different, harsher, almost unrecognizable. The tension built with every issue. The breaking point came when the Green Goblin launched a citywide assault. Otto realized that despite all his genius, he could never truly be Spider-Man. Peter Parker's spirit still lingered inside his mind, pushing back, waiting for the chance to return. In the end, Otto made the ultimate decision. He stepped aside, erasing his own presence so Peter could reclaim his body and stop the Goblin. Back in Black. The fallout of Civil War left Peter Parker exposed and vulnerable, and the price came fast. A sniper's bullet meant for him tore through Aunt May, sending her to the hospital in critical condition. For Peter, that was the breaking point. The red and blue suit was set aside. The black costume returned, a symbol of rage and determination. From that moment, Spider-Man hunted with a different edge. He cornered Jake Martino, one of the hired gunmen, in a subway station, and forced answers out of him. Martino didn't last long. A second hitman silenced him, but Peter had already marked his target. Every lead pulled the trail closer to Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, who had ordered the hit even while locked away behind bars. Peter tracked down the second shooter, pressed him for information, and gave his own blood to help stabilize May while she clung to life in the hospital. The line between hero and outlaw blurred as he committed break-ins and assaults to pay for her care, anything to keep her alive. Then came the reckoning inside Rikers Island. Peter stormed Kingpin's cell, unmasked himself, and beat Fisk into the ground in front of everyone. He promised that if Aunt May died, Fisk's suffering would be unlike anything he had ever faced. The black suit was a warning. Peter stopped short of killing Kingpin, walking away with his moral code intact, but the message was clear. The days of Spider-Man pulling his punches were over. Back in Black was Peter Parker at his most dangerous, driven not by responsibility alone, but by fury. It marked a turning point where Spider-Man wasn't fighting for the city. He was fighting for family. Amazing fantasy. Before the Marvel Universe even knew what was coming, one issue in 1962 changed everything. Amazing Fantasy number 15 dropped, and with it, Spider-Man was born. Peter Parker was just a quiet, awkward science kid in Queens. He lived with his Uncle Ben and Aunt May, kept to himself, and never had much confidence outside of a lab. Then came that moment, a science demonstration, a spider crawling into a radioactive beam, and one bite later, Peter's life was rewired. Suddenly, he had strength, balance, stamina, and the kind of wall-climbing agility that no other teenager on Earth could imagine. At first, Peter wasn't thinking about heroism, he was thinking about money. With his new powers, he stepped into a wrestling ring, tossed Crusher Hogan around like a ragdoll, and instantly drew headlines. TV executives loved him, and Peter crafted his iconic red and blue suit, complete with web shooters he built himself. For a moment, Spider-Man was a celebrity. That all collapsed in one night. During a show, Peter let a thief run past him, deciding it wasn't his problem. Hours later, he returned home to discover Uncle Ben had been murdered, and when Peter tracked down the criminal, the truth hit harder than any punch. The burglar was the same man he let escape. That revelation was brutal. Peter realized that his powers weren't for TV stunts or easy fame. His mistake had cost his uncle's life. From that night forward, Spider-Man became more than a costume. He became a responsibility. Kraven's last hunt. By the late 80s, Spider-Man comics took a darker turn, and no story captured it better than Kraven's Last Hunt. Sergei Kravenov, the big game hunter who had obsessed over Spider-Man for years, decided he needed one final victory before his time ended. Not just to beat Spider-Man, but to completely break him. One rainy night, Kraven ambushed Peter on a rooftop. A quick strike, a sedative dart, and Spider-Man was down. Kraven dragged him away, buried him alive on his own estate, and declared the hunt complete. But that wasn't enough. Kraven wanted to prove he could be the superior Spider-Man. Donning Peter's costume, Kraven patrolled the city with brutal force. Criminals who usually walked away beaten were now left shattered. His campaign peaked when he captured Vermin, a sewer-dwelling monster Spider-Man once struggled to defeat even with help. To Kraven, this was proof. He had accomplished what Spider-Man could not. 2 weeks passed. Underground, Peter clawed his way out of the grave in one of the most haunting panels in comic history. Weakened, dirty, but unbroken, he returned to confront Kraven, but Kraven didn't attack. He admitted he'd already won his victory and released Vermin as if to drive the point home. Peter chose the path Kraven never could. Instead of killing Vermin, he pursued him to bring him back to justice. That decision defined the difference between the two men. For Kraven, there was nothing left. He left behind a written confession, walked onto his estate grounds, and ended his own life with a rifle. One more day. This one picked up where Back in Black left off, with Aunt May clinging to life after the sniper attack. Peter Parker was desperate. He had already crossed lines trying to keep her alive, and now he turned everywhere for help. First stop was Tony Stark, hoping technology or money could save her. Nothing worked. Reed Richards, Hank Pym, even Dr. Doom and the High Evolutionary were consulted. No one could reverse the damage. Peter's last hope was magic. He turned to Dr. Strange, who warned him against tampering with time and reality. Still, Peter tried raiding Strange's tomes on his own, injuring himself in the process. Strange healed him, but made it clear some things couldn't be undone. Then came the encounter that rewrote Spider-Man's history. A little girl appeared to Peter, hinting at a solution. Moments later, she revealed her true form, Mephisto. The demon offered a bargain. Aunt May's life would be restored, but at a price. Peter and Mary Jane's marriage would be erased from existence. The deal cut deep. Peter and MJ agonized over it, but eventually accepted. Mary Jane whispered a private condition into Mephisto's ear, one he agreed to, but its details were never revealed. Then Mephisto twisted the knife further. The little girl was shown to be their future daughter, a child who would now never exist. When the bargain was sealed, reality shifted. Aunt May recovered. The world forgot Peter's secret identity, and Peter and MJ awoke in separate lives, their marriage gone as if it had never happened. The arc instantly divided fans. Some saw it as Marvel's way of resetting Spider-Man back to basics. Others saw it as a betrayal, erasing years of growth. Either way, one more day changed the character forever, pulling him back to square one at a devastating cost. Maximum carnage. The early 90s were loud, violent, and over the top, and Marvel leaned right into it with Maximum Carnage. It kicked off when Cletus Cassidy, already one of the most dangerous killers in the Marvel Universe, regenerated his symbiote inside Ravencroft and broke free. Once he transformed back into Carnage, he started recruiting. Shriek, with her sonic waves that could twist whole crowds into madness. Doppelganger, a feral, multi-armed Spider-Man clone. Demogoblin, who fed off pure chaos. And Carrion, a decaying clone with deadly touch. Together, they tore across Manhattan in a wave of murder and destruction. Shriek amplified it by projecting psychic energy that pushed ordinary people into violent riots. New York became a battlefield, and Spider-Man quickly realized he couldn't stop it alone. So came one of the strangest alliances in Spider-Man's history. He teamed up with Venom, the same enemy who once swore to kill him, because Carnage was too much for either of them. And it didn't stop there. Black Cat, Cloak and Dagger, Firestar, Iron Fist, Morbius, Nightwatch, Deathlock, even Captain America joined the fight. A massive street war broke out between Carnage's gang and Spider-Man's ragtag army of heroes. The fights were brutal. Venom got his hands on a sonic weapon, the one thing that could cut through Carnage's symbiote. Firestar and Cloak helped thin the chaos, while Captain America faced Shriek directly, using sheer resilience to shut her down. Carnage kept slipping away, even faking his death at one point by leaving behind a corpse disguised with symbiote. But Spider-Man and Venom tracked him to a cemetery for one last clash. A surge of energy from an electrical generator finally put him down, leaving Carnage captured and locked up again. The Clone Saga. It began with the return of Professor Miles Warren the Jackal, who had secretly been cloning Spider-Man for years. Out of that experiment came Ben Reilly, a clone of Peter Parker who survived and built his own life in the shadows, eventually stepping back into New York as the Scarlet Spider. At first, Peter and Ben clashed, unsure if either could trust the other, but their paths began to run parallel, each carrying the same powers and the same sense of duty. Things got messier when DNA tests surfaced, claiming Peter was actually the clone, and Ben was the real Peter Parker all along. That revelation rocked the fanbase and even pushed Peter into retiring, leaving the Scarlet Spider to take up the Spider-Man mantle. Meanwhile, Peter's personal life took a dramatic turn. Mary Jane became pregnant, only for tragedy to strike when their child was lost through the manipulations of Norman Osborn's schemes. The entire saga sprawled across years, pulling in multiple clones, imposters, and layers of deception until the truth was finally revealed. The DNA tests were fraudulent. Norman Osborn reemerged as the puppet master behind everything. In the final confrontation, Ben Reilly sacrificed himself to save Peter, disintegrating upon death and proving once and for all that he was the clone. The Clone Saga remains one of the most divisive arcs in comic history. Fans love the Scarlet Spider's costume and personality, but the constant twists and dragged-out storytelling turned the saga into a cautionary story of excess. Still, it left its mark, raising deep questions about identity, truth, and what it really means to be Spider-Man. And that's it. So now to you, if you could erase just one Spider-Man storyline from history, not just from the comics, but from Peter Parker's life itself, which one would it be? And how different do you think his world would look? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.